Hi, everyone. Welcome and thank you for joining us today. We are so excited to have you here for our annual webinar on Regional Forums for Sustainable Development for Gender Equality and Women's Human Rights. We have some incredible speakers here today, but before we jump into anything, we will quickly run through some ground rules. We have interpretation available in Spanish and French. To listen to the speakers in a different language, please click on the globe icon at the bottom right of your screen and head over to the interpretation channel you'd like to go to. I will now pass the floor to our Spanish interpreters to make the same announcement in Spanish. Over to you.
Gracias. Buenos días, buenas tardes, buenas noches. Si ustedes prefieren escuchar y participar en español hoy y están conectando desde un computador, por favor, hagan clic en el globo abajo que dice interpretación y elijan español. Si están conectando desde una tableta o un teléfono, toquen los tres punticos abajo a la derecha donde dice más, elijan interpretación, español y arriba a mano derecha toquen finalizado o hecho. Si en algún momento tienen alguna pregunta o dificultad con la interpretación, porfa déjenos saber en el chat y con mucho gusto les apoyamos. Y las instrucciones también están en el chat. Ahora se lo paso a nuestras colegas de francés.
Bonjour, si vous souhaitez écouter cette réunion en français ou vous exprimer en français, il faut vous mettre sur le canal français en cliquant sur le petit symbole en forme de globe en bas de votre écran et choisir français, cliquez sur terminer. Vous pouvez aussi couper l'audio original. Et si vous utilisez un smartphone, l'option interprétation se trouve en cliquant sur les trois petits points en bas à droite ou en haut à droite de votre écran. Interprétation de langue, français, terminé. Merci.
Thank you, Maria and Simon. Just a few ground rules. This is a safe space. We do not tolerate hate speech or discriminatory remarks. If there are any security concerns, you can reach out to Shanaz or me. I think we can directly jump into our next bit, and I'll hand over to Shanaz. Over to you.
Thank you, Maitri. Hi, everyone. I'm Shehnaz. I'm the coordinator of the Women's Major Group, and we're very happy to be kind of hosting this webinar and being with all of you today. For those of you who might be new to the Women's Major Group, as this is a public webinar, the Women's Major Group is an international feminist collective, intersectional feminist collective, as well as international, created at after the 1992 Earth Summit in Rio de Janeiro, and is an official participant in the United Nations processes on sustainable development. WMG, the shorter way we call the Women's Major Group, has the responsibility to facilitate feminist and women's rights civil society organizations' active participation, information sharing, and input into the policy space provided by the United Nations on Agenda 2030 and Sustainable Development. We're self-organized, we're open to all interested organizations that promote human rights-based sustainable development with a focus on gender equality and women's human rights. But unfortunately, at this point, we find ourselves not in a very hopeful and optimistic situation in terms of where we are, both on gender equality, which has, as you all know, been estimated that, at this rate, it would take us over 200 years to reach gender equality in laws, but as well as the SDG implementation. In terms of the SDGs, we know that only 12% of the SDG targets are in track, and unfortunately, some are even backtracking from where they have been. So we really need bolder steps, more ambition, and more realization of transformative change. And we believe that begins on the ground, that begins with the realities of people. And that makes the regional processes actually very important to feed into the global process as impactfully and efficiently as possible. We believe that regional work allows for stronger advocacy, stronger collaborations for the joint common problems and common opportunities for the regions. they're also kind of easier for many of the activists to actually relate to, engage with, but we'll be hearing from many of our amazing speakers on why they think regional work is important and how, and the best practices and the challenges that they face in that work. So you see that these are the 5 regional economic commissions under the ECOSOC of the United Nations. If we can go to the next slide, Maitri. So this is a very crude map of the regional commissions. And the reason is that you'll see there's some overlap between EC and ESCWA, which is the Regional Commission for Europe and Regional Commission for Europe, and ESCAP, Regional Commission for Asia Pacific, as Russia, Turkey, and Central Asian member states belong to both sides. There are overlaps in the Africa region and ESCWA, Western Asia region. So these are not, separate, very separate from each other, which is actually also very helpful for the work, which we can continue to talk about. But this gives you a broad idea of how the regions kind of are divided. So we have the European region, the ECLAC, Latin America, and the Caribbean region, Africa, Western Asia, and ESCAP. So we have speakers today from 4 of these regions. Our moderator was going to be Sarah Auji, our Arab States organizing partner. Unfortunately, she regrets not being able to be with us due to health concerns, but we will talk about the Arab States region very shortly in between the speeches. But to kick us off, can we go to the next slide, Maitri? Apologies. So this slide actually gives you the dates for the regional forums on sustainable development in 2024. If you want to take a screen grab, we're also recording this call, so you would also be able to refer to this later on. But they're all kind of placed across February to April of each year. And it's actually, it always helps. The outcome of one region always helps the outcome of the other region as well. So these should definitely not be thought of in very separate entities, but as you have seen in the map, there are many overlapping both member states as well as issues, as we'll talk about. Thank you so much, Maitri. And now to kick us off, I would like to give the floor to Pamela Martin Garcia, a feminist activist and part of Vecinas Feministas, and she's the focal point of the women's group of the ECLAC major groups and other stakeholders. Pamela, could you talk us a little bit about the importance of the regional forums and the civil society inclusion in ECLAC, but especially also kind of some of those best practices that you're working with, like, for example, doing a form of voluntary national reviews in the region before coming to the HLPF. Thank you so much, Pamela. The floor is yours.
Gracias. Good morning, good afternoon. I will speak in Spanish for the interpreters and colleagues. Okay. Bueno, gracias, Enas, por la invitación y por organizar este webinario. Varias cosas. Primero contarles que, como decía Enas, soy el punto focal del grupo de mujeres. Del mecanismo de participación de la sociedad civil que da seguimiento a la Agenda 2030. Al menos en esta región nos organizamos bajo este mecanismo y también estamos muy cercanos y de buena interacción y articulación con la CEPAL en este caso, con la comisión de esta región. Tenemos todo un mecanismo desarrollado desde la sociedad civil, desde aquella primera reunión en México en 2016. Me acuerdo que aquellas primeras reuniones un salón gigante, lleno de mesas y de personas de sociedad civil que dábamos seguimiento a todos los ODS, porque también estábamos muy acostumbradas, en especial las organizaciones feministas, a que nosotras vamos a los espacios intergubernamentales de Naciones Unidas, ya sea en Nueva York o aquí en CEPAL, y somos nosotras, digamos, y estamos las feministas sosteniendo varias agendas, ¿no? Me refiero más a Beijing y a Cairo, y de pronto llegamos a este espacio, y este espacio estamos todos, ¿sí? En este espacio estamos quienes seguimos el ODS 5 de manera transversal, pero el que solamente sigue los océanos, digamos, convivimos, y eso les debe pasar a ustedes también. Y nos pasa en el espacio global, digo, como Women Major Group también lo hemos visto, a veces las dificultades que tiene la articulación en estos espacios, y que a veces hay, bueno, grupos no afines a otras agendas que quieren participar, y que se hace difícil, y ya sabemos la avanzada antiderechos y fundamentalistas, y entonces también hay que tener muchas alertas al respecto. Entonces, dicho esto, tenemos un mecanismo de participación, como les decía, estamos ya en más de 15 grupos temáticos, cada grupo tiene punto focal, y esos puntos focales nos reunimos en lo que llamamos mesa, la mesa de vinculación, que tenemos reuniones mensuales. Y nuestro grupo de mujeres tuvimos reuniones mensuales hasta septiembre incluida, hasta llegar a la Cumbre del Futuro, y ahora estamos en un impasse, y vamos a retomar seguramente para enero, como hicimos el año pasado, a fines de enero, para organizarnos hasta abril, que como ustedes vieron es la fecha de nuestro foro. En el marco de las buenas prácticas, yo creo que esta es una buena práctica. En principio, cómo nos organizamos dentro del mecanismo, todos los grupos. Tenemos términos de referencia hechos por nosotras mismas, que justamente estamos en el último proceso de revisión de cómo es la toma de decisiones, cómo nos organizamos, los tiempos. Eso es una buena práctica, y ahí damos las discusiones en la mesa, y la mesa también tiene que luego transmitir cada punto focal a su grupo temático lo conversado. En mi caso, tenemos punto focal titular, digamos que soy yo, y punto focal suplente, que es Valeria, que es otra compañera, Valeria Vázquez, desde la Red Latinoamericana de Jóvenes. Nosotras entramos, tenemos periodos de punto focal, somos elegidas por las mismas compañeras del grupo, por 2 años, tenemos mandato, y entramos ya casi llegando al foro de este año del 2023. Entonces, en primer lugar, también decirles que en mi caso voy a desarrollar más, digamos, voy a participar más de lleno en lo que es la organización y la preparación del foro en este 2024. Para el 2023 igual yo ya hacía parte del grupo de las mujeres y demás, pero entiendo, por supuesto, va a ser distinto al ser punto focal. Entonces, esa buena práctica. Segundo, que de cara al foro, nosotras, de cara al foro de países, organizamos como mesa, como mecanismo, perdón, de participación de la sociedad civil TODE, con el grupo Mujeres haciendo parte, el foro de sociedad civil le llamamos, que lo hacemos el día previo a que comience el foro oficial de países, ¿sí? Y eso nos permite organizarnos, trabajar cada ODS, revisar los acuerdos que están discutiendo los países, y ver cómo nos plantamos y nos configuramos de cara a la reunión de 2 o 3 días del foro de países. Como grupo mujeres también siempre intentamos, este año que pasó en 2023, como estamos en fin de año, ya no sé bien en qué año estoy, pero en el 2023, como grupo de mujeres, decidimos organizar un evento paralelo. Siempre tratamos de, ¿no?, como tener un espacio propio más allá del foro de sociedad civil y del foro de países. Esto sí, con todos los años se han tratado de hacer y este año lo hicimos también. Y vemos qué tema y qué conviene políticamente, más allá de los ODS a revisar. Y para nosotras como Grupo Mujeres este año en esta región, el Consenso de Montevideo cumplió 10 años. Y es el instrumento más progresista que tenemos en la región en materia de derechos humanos. Y ya sabemos que el año que viene son los 30 años de Cairo. Entonces, hicimos una articulación con el Fondo de Población de Naciones Unidas y también con algunos países clave, y realizamos un evento paralelo sobre cómo articular la Agenda 2030 con el Consenso de Montevideo. Entonces, ese fue un muy buen evento, fue muy bien recibido por los países, tuvimos a la directora del Fondo de Población, y también nos preparó, porque quienes somos parte del grupo de las mujeres, hacemos parte, como les decía, de sostener y de empujar otras agendas. Entonces también nos sirvió porque era temprano en el año, fue en abril, y luego vendría el proceso del Consenso de Montevideo, y siempre teniendo a la vista la Agenda 2030, que es el marco grande, es donde los estados sí han puesto estructura, han puesto dinero, y no así tanto en el Consenso de Montevideo. Entonces nosotras queremos tratar de hacer dialogar esas agendas. Entonces, esa es otra buena práctica, ¿no? Cómo entonces repasamos, cómo nos organizamos, el foro de sociedad civil, que tengamos un espacio propio como Grupo Mujeres en evento paralelo, un evento paralelo en el organigrama oficial, ¿sí? Lo tuvimos en un espacio oficial de la conferencia. Y la otra buena práctica que tenemos también desde el mecanismo, no solo desde el Grupo Mujeres, es siempre tenemos reuniones clave con CEPAL, para que tenga la sociedad civil un espacio en los paneles oficiales del foro. Este año se revisaron 4 o 5 ODS, 6, 7, 9, 11, 17, 5. Fueron 5 paneles temáticos durante el foro de países. En los 5 participó una persona del mecanismo de la sociedad civil que elegimos desde el mecanismo. Y entonces sociedad civil, desde todo el mecanismo, no solo por tu organización personal o por tu grupo, por mecanismo estás sentado en el panel y tenés la sociedad civil vos, y entre todas, durante el foro de sociedad civil, quien va a ser panelista comparte, por ejemplo, sus talking points, sus puntos que va a decir, y ahí entonces más o menos otros compañeros si quieren opinan o ofrecen información, pero digo, todos sabemos qué vamos a decir, lo decimos, es la voz del mecanismo en el panel oficial. Y eso es muy importante, y ha sido muy importante para nosotros, y hemos logrado incluso que CEPAL apoye financieramente a las personas del mecanismo que son panelistas. Porque a veces elegimos panelistas dentro del mecanismo que dicen, bueno, yo no tengo financiamiento, pero lo elegimos para ser panelista, y CEPAL da ese financiamiento, lo cual también es algo muy importante. Pero esto es una construcción también de años, digo, desde el 2016, que estamos siempre tratando de mejorar el mecanismo y la articulación con CEPAL. Y por último, previo al Foro de Países y en el marco del Foro de Países, tratamos de tener una reunión solo de los puntos focales, es decir, la mesa de este mecanismo, con el secretario general de la CEPAL. Y el secretario a veces adjunto, y quizás algunas personas de otras agencias. Pero siempre tenemos una reunión cerrada de diálogo de la sociedad civil con el secretario, antes era con la secretaria, ahora el secretario, una reunión más cercana, más en corto, de la posición de la sociedad civil. Lo que no hemos logrado aún, y con esto termino, y fue una gran discusión en el foro de este año sobre los informes de país. Tenemos nuestros foros están construidos, como les decía, el foro de países tiene paneles temáticos, siempre se vuelve a presentar, hay una plataforma que tiene, en esta región, CEPAL tiene una plataforma para dar a conocer la Agenda 2030, es público, cualquiera puede entrar, lo cual es una buena herramienta, tiene estadísticas, tiene información sobre los ODS. Obviamente siempre tenemos el espacio de lectura de la Declaración de la Sociedad Civil, eso creo que no lo había dicho, y también la construimos en el foro de sociedad civil previo, en los días previos, y siempre tenemos un espacio oficial en la agenda, tenemos 15 minutos para leer la Declaración de Sociedad Civil, generalmente es el primer día, al mediodía, antes de que termine la sesión de la mañana. Pero tenemos las dificultades, así que me gustaría por ahí escuchar sobre otras regiones cómo lo están trabajando y cómo están con la estrategia de incidencia, porque estamos tratando de desarrollar una estrategia de incidencia por los informes de país. Los informes de países, los gobiernos no van a informar, van a mostrar, ya sabemos, cosas como todas las cosas lindas que se supone que hacen y a veces están mintiendo, ya lo sabemos. Y entonces, ¿cómo poder hacer que se presenten? Tuvimos una mesa de diálogo, no me puedo acordar, estoy tratando de acordarme desde que me levanté y no lo logré, pero bueno, es un equipo técnico que a veces apoya a CEPAL, pero es parte igual de sociedad civil, en que al menos los gobiernos de esta región que van a presentar informe de país en el High Level Political Forum, en el foro político de alto nivel, lo presenten primero en la región, que presenten como un bienestar más estructurado y que marque los desafíos. Y entonces, generalmente te dicen, no, pero porque la fecha para entregarlo es más adelante y estamos en abril. A veces la fecha de entrega que dieron en Nueva York es de una semana después del foro, 2 semanas después del foro, es decir, lo podrían tener, o no completo quizás, eso es lo que les dijimos a algunos países, quizás no tenerlo completo, pero sí tener un resumen. Si lo prepararon para el foro de alto nivel, en el espacio global, ¿cómo no lo vas a presentar en el espacio regional? Entonces, sobre eso todavía estamos trabajando para fortalecer el espacio de reporte de los países a nivel regional. Entonces, por ahora me quedo ahí y aprovecho a escuchar a otras compañeras que también me va a hacer recordar quizás algunas otras prácticas o desafíos como esto que acabo de marcar. O si hay preguntas, quedo abierta.
Thank you so much, Pame. Especially interesting that the part about the country reviews, as you mentioned, the voluntary national reviews that happen at the global level and how to take that to the regional level, definitely. And as you have said, many of the countries actually start this process very early in the previous year. We already know which member states will be presenting their voluntary national reviews in 2024. The list was closed in September. So then, why not bring something to the regional level, even if an outline, as you say, and share it with your neighbors, your ally member states of the region. Thank you so much. I want to pause here to see if there are any questions to Pame. Apologies. Hannah, please go ahead.
It's not a question that I can respond to, Pame.
Yes, please.
He was asking, what do we do in other regions? And we have also, so I am Hanna Gunnarsson from Women Engaged for Common Future. I'm based in the ECE region, so that's Europe, Caucasus, and Central Asia. We are also pushing for the regionalization of the VNRs, the voluntary national reviews. We will also want them to kind of come together at the regional level to discuss them, and we want to see the first draft by member states. But we have raised this to the UN every year. We tell the UN every year when we have bilaterals, we tell them we need regionalization of the process. They've been saying there's lack of political will from the member states. But what we've done is that we've incorporated into the civil society forum that happens before. So we always have a session on VNRs. And at that session, we usually invite member states. So we have member states who are doing VNRs, and they get to kind of show what has worked and what has not worked. Obviously, it is a holiday commercial, and you obviously also it's our allies that we invite. It's usually not the VNR countries. They're like really bad with engaging civil society, but that has been quite useful, because then we've seen that those member states kind of steps up and supports our arguments in the other regional forum. So that's been quite good. And then we've also continued having follow-up session at the HLPF, and where we again meet with these member states that engaged in our civil society forum. So we're building relationship that way. But not saying we're doing perfectly. We're definitely not. But the UN is saying that for them and their member states, it's more important to nationalize and localize. So they're doing a lot more regionalization within the countries. But there's very little cross-regional discussion.
Thank you, Hannah. Maybe something that might be helpful to remind at this point when you mentioned the kind of national and local implementation is that for the very first time this year's political declaration that came out of the SDG summit included a commitment by the member states to develop and implement national action plans for SDG implementation. Although we know many member states have already started doing that in their own capacities, this time it basically became the political commitment of all 193 member states who have adopted the SDG summit. So please do look if your country has already have a national action plan, or if they're developing one, what could be the ways to engage, and bringing those, whether the implementation or whether the development and how the process going to the regional level might be another opportunity for advocacy, perhaps. Any other questions for Pamela? Okay, if not, then I will gladly give the floor to Pielito, our dear Cham Perez. She's the Executive Director of Center for Women's Resources, and she's also the Women's Major Group Asia Pacific Organizing Partner and the focal point for the Women's Constituency in Asia Pacific Regional Civil Society Engagement Forum. Hi, Cham.
Hi. Okay. I'm going to keep my video off because the internet might not hold up. Okay. So
but it's lovely to hear you. The
okay.
floor is yours. Sorry, I was just gonna say
Alright.
the floor is yours.
All right. So for the Asia Pacific region, of course, you know that we have the Asia Pacific Regional CSO Engagement Mechanism, which is the first regional civil society engagement mechanism to be formed, no, or organized. In APRSM, as we call it, we also have different constituencies. We have 17 and sub-regional constituencies, which is 5, no? The goal of APRSM is really to promote and facilitate an inclusive, politically unified civil society platform that works to collaboratively increase accountability of the states, no? Particular to APRSM, we are politically unified through a framework of development, which we call the Development Justice Framework, that aims to reduce inequalities of wealth, power, and resources between countries, between the rich and the poor, between men and women, and other social groups. APRSM really focuses on tackling different systemic issues and structural barriers that hinders the achievement of the 2030 agenda. So the push for development justice is very important for APRSM, and we take this framework in our engagements with the with ESCAP through the regional through the regional forum. So with regards to our relationship with ESCAP, for the regional forum, the Asia Pacific Forum on Sustainable Development, APRSM functions as the official civil society organizing partner of UNESCAP, which is responsible for coordinating civil society outreach and participation in the forum. But I think more importantly, the work that APRSM is doing is to organize the People's Forum, the Asia Pacific People's Forum on Sustainable Development. It is usually a 3-day gathering of civil society organizations and people's movements across the region that takes place prior to the APFSD. So this People's Forum, I would say, is also a best practice for us, because it provides a space where there is a sharing of experiences, discussions, debates that would lead to a joint CSO position statements that has the key sustainable development issues, and of course our analysis, which takes the development justice perspective. Aside from, so during this People's Forum, we also do a lot of parallel events or side events to highlight important issues that its constituency members would like to take on. Another preparation that we do for the regional forum and for the People's Forum is that we are having a series of discussions to build our fact sheets. So we have fact sheets on different goals and goals under review every year, but also on specific issues that our constituents would like to focus on. For instance, we would have a fact sheet on corporate capture. We would have fact sheets on SRHR, aside from the goals under review. And these fact sheets would guide the different constituencies in our engagements, both at the People's Forum and at the regional forum happening usually in Bangkok. Another thing that I would like to share, and we are doing this especially with the women's constituency in APRSM, is that we really encourage solidarity actions. We do encourage supporting each other's campaigns that would further amplify women and people's issues. So what we are hoping in APRSM and in the women's constituency of APRSM is that our discussions, our collective actions, and our collective support to each other's campaign would happen not only around the People's Forum and the APFSD, but it would happen all year round. So we have been planning about regular regular discussions, even online, just to catch up with each other, discuss important issues that are happening, come up with our common analysis or common understanding of those particular issues. And if any movement would need our support, we would be able to extend any kind of support that we can, even outside of the People's Forum and even outside of the regional forum. So that is one that I am very fortunate that we have, no, in the women's constituency and in APRSM, and we have also been bringing this, no, not only to the regional forum but also to the global forum during the high-level political forum on the SDGs. Okay. What else? Okay. Maybe another thing that I would like to share is that the women's constituency in APRSM is actually one of the most organized among the constituencies. It has one of the constituencies that has the highest number of members. Right now, APRSM has around 400 to 500 members, and about 100 of them are with the women's constituency. Of course, a challenge is that not all of them are active, but we've been looking for ways to activate the membership, because as you know, Senas have shared, no, it's not looking good for all of us, especially with regards to gender equality and women's human rights. We've been seeing a lot of backsliding on women's human rights, and there really is a need to activate our membership, strengthen our mechanism where we can continue to advocate for gender equality and women's human rights. So I'm going to stop there. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to share more about APRSM and women's constituency within the APRSM.
Thank you so much, Cham. I think especially your reference to the solidarity across movements and how that kind of both solidifies but also strengthens the regional engagement mechanism towards kind of common demands in front of member states and the regional commission has been a very strong point coming forward. Any questions for Cham? Or any comments, contributions you'd like to make? Krishna, please.
Hello, Shehnaz. So,
Hi.
yeah, this is Kazi.
Quasi, so sorry, there was a hand up. I can give you the floor right after if that's okay.
Okay.
So I can speak now?
Thank you. Please, Krishna, please go.
Okay, thank you, Sanat. This is wonderful topics we are discussing, but I'm a little bit confused now. How we are talking about? We are talking about the gender equality and our work, and another part, the women human rights, because these are very crucial things. We are more focusing on VLR and VNR, but this is, you know, most of the countries, they are doing very close circuit and trying to avoid the even civil society engagement, and government is trying to prepare the documents, which seems that they are very active, they are very sincere and doing things, but ultimately the result is very worse. Nothing good result, which is already reflected in the SDG summit. because this is only SDG achievement is 13% or around. So I'm very much confused, even though in Nepal, this is in 2024, Nepal is presenting again PNR. That will be third time after 17, 20, and then 24. So we are here in Nepal, we are trying very much to bring together with the government as a partnership, not as their workers. Sometimes they like, sometimes they don't like. So maybe in other country will be the same situation. So our mechanisms, we have to be very careful. As a civil engagement, we have to work together very much in the regional level, sharing each other very, very truly. And because the resource is very much constrained. And I think in the whole UN mechanism is supporting to the government machinery, but the government is not interesting to the civil society. So how we can contribute properly? So this is very much challenging. So please think on it. For this time, thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Krishna. Maybe we can go to Kwazi and I can give the floor back to Chem.
Sure.
Okay, thank you, Shanas. Actually, in our country, we are working on gender equality, and there are many organizations that those are working on gender equality, government also. But do you think the SDG, to achieve the SDG, gender equality, not only the SDG 5, I think it is involved in all SDG, because in all SDG, other SDGs, there it is important to make the gender equality in every sector. So otherwise, it would be difficult to achieve the SDG by 2030, because it is very difficult. Still, we are suffering a lot because it is a male-dominated society, and it's very difficult to make it balanced society. So we have to raise our voice more, and then we think that we'll be able to achieve SDG, and more advocacy would be needed. So it's from my side, thank you.
Thank you so much, Kwazi, for your comments as well. Chem, would you like to come in? I know that the women's group in APR-SAM is very strong to kind of mainstreaming is not always the best word, but kind of mainstream and make sure that gender equality is cross-cutting in all the demands.
Yes, thank you, Senes, and thank you for those interventions. Maybe one thing that I would like to repeat, it would seem like really the space is shrinking for civil society, especially in these kinds of spaces, engagements with governments, and sometimes even with the regional commissions. No? But precisely why we need to continue working, at least continue our engagement with the regional commission. For instance, in APR-SEM, we have a quite good relationship with the regional commission, and that good relationship enables the participation of civil society, including women and feminist organizations in the processes. In the engagement at the regional processes, we might have time to speak, we might not have time to speak, but being able to go there and advocate for our issues, for our demands, not only during those speaking time, but discussing bilaterally, say with governments, with the commission, with other civil society organizations that are engaged in the process is also very important. And also, when we sometimes it gets frustrating, no, when we've been preparing our statements and we are not heard, we are not given time. And that's why there really is a need to talk about the systemic and structural issues that hinders not only the achievement of the 2030 agenda, but even hindering the meaningful, inclusive participation of civil society and especially grassroots organizations in these processes. No, with regards to how we advocate for our issues with say other constituencies or other groups, what the women's constituency in APRSM would do is that, because it's a big group, no, we are not asking for say new APRSM members to come to women's constituency. No? It's okay if they are not with the women's constituency, but we encourage them to engage with us, sit down with us, discuss with us when we talk about the issues, when we talk about our analysis, and when we talk about our demands and alternatives. And we ask them, when you go to your own constituencies, say workers and trade unions or farmers' constituencies or fisher folks, no? We encourage them to bring those analyses, to bring those demands and alternatives in their own statements, in their own interventions, so that our demands, no, and our analysis are also incorporated, not only with the women's constituency interventions, but also in other constituencies. So that's what we are doing, not only advocating with the regional commission or the governments or the other civil society organizations that are not yet with APRSM, but even within APRSM, we are also doing a lot of advocacy works. I'm going to stop there. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your responses, Jem. So just to keep us on time, if that's okay, can we go to the next slide, Maitri? Thank you so much. So I'll just talk a little about the ESQUA region, which is Western Asia, and generally the Arab-speaking states. As I have mentioned, our regional organizing partner from the region couldn't be with us today because of health reasons. She is Sarah Auji from Rausa Network. But if there's anyone from the region, I just wanted to make sure that we highlight the regional connection as well. And there is unfortunately currently no organized civil society engagement mechanism like the ones we have discussed for ECLAC or Asia Pacific. There's none, unfortunately, yet for the ESQUA region. However, there's still regional civil society consultation conference prior to the Arab Forum for Sustainable Development. There's a one-day civil society conference, and that is organized by the Arab NGO Network for Development. So if there's anyone from the region, if anyone wants to get in touch with the regional process from ESQUA, please do feel free to reach out to us and we'll get you connected with our organizing partner and, if needed, the Arab NGO Network for Development as well. I'm so sorry. I'm also recovering. I know many in the Northern Hemisphere are having this problem with coughs right now. So I hope you're all keeping healthy. So without further ado, we can actually go to our next region. And I can give the floor to Hannah Gunnarsson, who is a gender expert on advocacy and campaigning in Women Engaged for a Common Future. And she's one of the co-founders of the EC Regional Civil Society Engagement Mechanism. Please, Hannah, the floor is yours.
Thank you. And for the flow of today, I'm gonna have a presentation, but I know that this presentation is a bit information overload, so don't hesitate to kind of cut me short and ask me questions when something is not clear. I try not to have too much jargon, but it's impossible when it comes to this. So don't ever feel uncomfortable asking questions, right? So I'm not a co-founder of ECRSM. I was not there when ECRSM was founded, but I have been helping with secretariat support for a long time. So ECRSM, another wonderful acronym, is short for Regional Civil Society Engagement Mechanism. And we have pretty much copied what Sean was talking about, the Asia Pacific one, which has been a great inspiration for how we mobilize on the EC region. So the EC region looks like this. And I know Shanaz showed us already what the regions looks like, but I just want you to look at this and take it in, you know? It's a very weird region we have here. And it is weird in terms of the diversity. We have some of like the historic colonizers and current colonizers in this region. We also have countries that has historically been colonized by these colonizers. We also have a mixture of, we've thrown in a little bit of the US and Canada. We don't have Mexico, but we do have Israel. So there's a lot here that comes with this package of the ECRSM. So EC is short for Economic Commission for Europe. But it's not Europe, you know. So I just wanted you to have a look at it because it's weird. And it does make it quite complex when we then come together and do advocacy as civil society. But I wanted to go up to this, and what is the ECRSM? So I sit on ECRSM, the governing body. I am one of the governing body representatives, and I'm a governing body representative for the EU region. But I also wear other hats because I used to be an OP for Women's Major Group, and I'm also part of Women's Major Group. So we come to this, and when we come to this as civil society, we have at least two hats on us when we come to the space. And what we are, the way you can think of ECRSM is that it's kind of an umbrella network that facilitates all of civil society's engagement at the regional level. So we facilitate any kind of civil society representatives who wants to do advocacy on the regional level, and they don't know what to do, where to go. And we kind of are in the background, kind of setting up the structures, having the discussions with the UN, and making sure we are aware of all the advocacy opportunities that are presented to us, and then that there's a process and selection that is fair in terms of who is going to represent us at these very few opportunities that the regional forum presents. I think there's quite a lot to say, and this presentation is quite chunky, but I will send it to you afterwards and you can take your time and go through it. But I'll look at the most interesting bits is that just like the Asia Pacific, we also have regional and thematic constituencies. And the thematic constituencies are kind of, at the moment, we've just done a reorganization. They're kind of reflective of the thematic groups on the global level. So we have the same ones that are under the major groups and other stakeholders. But this is it. We are self-organized, and we always have our doors open for any new group that feel that their thematic interest is not represented among us. Currently, we don't have active groups on all of these topics engaging. We don't have urban and poor, for example, engaging. Usually we don't have that many indigenous people coming to engage as a collective at the regional forum. So there's constantly a lot of remobilization or mobilization overall of new members. So that's thematic. Then we also have regional. The regional is hard because it's hard to kind of cluster these countries that have so much different realities. We try to cluster it by Eastern Europe, Caucasus, and Central Asia. We realize this is also very huge differences between and within these countries. We have the Balkan states, we have the European Union, and then we have others, which includes Andorra and Canada and the UK and US and the whatnot, and Israel. So it is a quite eclectic mixture of groups. And why, what does this matter? How does this matter? Why do we have sub-regional groups? And the same way that Asia Pacific has sub-regional groups. It's to kind of bring in those groups who are maybe not engaging in the thematic discussions, but want to be participating in this. And they do have a lot of analysis on what's happening within their region that they want to kind of come and put on our agenda, on our table. So we wanted to facilitate that people who doesn't come through it from a okay, I'm a feminist, I'm going to engage in the women's major group, people who maybe not come from that perspective can engage, but also you can also be a feminist and be part of the sub-regional ones. Please again, let me know if I'm going too fast or if you have questions, okay? In terms of why do we need the regional work and why is it important? I think we really struggle in our region because I think the questions we've had so far has been quite good on this call. What does it matter? What does all this focus on the VNRs matter? What does the regional matter? And we've had issues because the interest in the regional forum is very varied depending on where in our region you come from. We've seen that there's less and less engagement at the regional and more engagement at the high-level political forum that happens in the UN by many civil society groups from specifically the global North states in our region. And I think one of the issues is that there is decrease in funding. We already talked about the closing space in civil society. There's decrease in funding generally to engage in the Agenda 2030, in the 2030 agenda. There's also, I think, for some countries in our region, the confusement, why should we focus on the regional meeting where we can just focus on the EU and follow them and do advocacy around the EU. And then you also have, coupled with that, since we are self-organized, we don't have any funding, we're not an organization or an institution, we don't have money to bring people to the regional forum. So we're very much dependent on the UN or UN bodies to kind of support us with this. And as we know, the UN in our region is also losing a lot of funding support to do this work. So we are getting less and less support in terms of bringing people to the forum. So that means we also have a lot less engagement from people from Central Asia and Caucasus, etc. And I think what I would like to say to address this issue is that the regional forum is, however, even though I said this is quite dark, but it's not that dark, because in reality, the regional forum is really, really a nice place to do advocacy. It's a place where you really can talk to your decision makers and you can get to know decision makers that you have been struggling to get hold of on the national level. All of a sudden you're standing in the same food line to get some food at the buffet at the social, it presents really nice interactions, natural interactions with decision makers. It's also a place where you can come and do networking with other civil society who are having similar issues. And you can see that it's very structural. You can get a lot of confidence in the fact that there's a structural issue and you can learn from each other. So that's also another reason why it's been really nice to have the regional forum, why it's so crucial. I also think one of the things to mention is that the regional forum is a space where you can, if you come from a country which has a lot of restrictions on human rights or pushback on civil society engagement, within a regional mechanism, within a bigger civil society mechanism, you don't have to criticize your government, but someone within our group of civil society can criticize the government on your behalf, so you don't get targeted. So there's a lot of security mesh, like security built into being a collective to do this together. I also think there is quite, we very often get stuck on our siloed approaches, our analyses, and I know we said gender equality and SDG 5 is interlinked with all of them, but also women's major group is interlinked with all these other constituencies having very specific focuses through the regional mechanisms. And that also gives us a lot of learning. It makes us stronger. I mean, when we join together, we become stronger, but it also makes it sometimes harder because we have to kind of find common narratives or common positions that we agree upon. But generally, I would say it's been quite easy since we take some core within the ECRs, we have some core principles of human rights, planetary boundaries, etc. So that is also great. And what the way you can look at the regional mechanism and civil society as a space is as we're watchdogs, but already at the regional forum, you'll get countries coming to do their holiday commercial. They're making themselves sound a lot better, but for us, it's really good then to have a strong civil society there that can point that out, and also can ask the crucial questions to decision makers. Do you have any questions? Am I going too fast? I see questions in the... Okay, if there's any question, feel free to raise your hand. Right, so what do I want to show you? So last year, there's a couple of common there's a couple of common themes for our region specifically, and this is one of the statements we had from last year. But in terms of moving forward and the analysis we're going to have to do for the next advocacy roadmap for next year, is that our region, I showed you, it's very diverse, it's very broad. We have lots of different countries, and I think as civil society we have a huge responsibility to hold decision makers accountable for their actions and inactions and how that's impacting the rest of the world. I mean, like, we have a lot of the global minority, they're called. These are the countries that are sitting on most of the wealth in the world. We have a lot of them in our region. So as civil society, we have a huge, like a tremendous amount of responsibility to hold them accountable. And we have that responsibility towards the rest of the world. Like, we need to address this at our regional level, at our national level. There's also a huge diversity of implementation and challenges within the region and also within the countries. As I said before, we have the colonizers and also those who have been historically colonized in our region. There's huge diversity between rural and urban realities in the region. We have currently, as you've probably seen, but it's also trend globally, huge wave of anti-gender and far-right actors across the region, and they're impacting democracy, and they're closing the space for civil society, and it's leading to further polarization, right? I talked about the global minority, but in order to hold them accountable, we always talk about something called their historical responsibilities. It's basically looking at post structures of colonialism and then taking the post-colonialism approach, and then kind of identifying actions where they need to step up and do more in order to kind of wage against all the harm they've done in the past that kind of still exist through structures of inequalities. And that includes, for example, one of the common themes that we've had within the ECRSM that we've come together is calls for degrowth and call for well-being economy. We've had calls for cancelling the debt. Let's see this one. We've also had calls for ending illicit financial flows and end to extractivism. And we also constantly call about asking big polluters to step up and pay, right? I don't know, but the region is also a region with a lot of conflicts. I'm not saying conflicts is only happening in our region, but we have a lot of conflicts in our region. We have currently, well, they're also like long-going conflicts. So it's Azerbaijan, Armenia, Ukraine, Russia, Israel. Okay, Palestine is not part of our region, but Israel is. And we have a lot of fragile peace. So we have a lot of states that have been in conflict that are not currently in conflict, but their peace is maybe not the most sustainable. It could be something that yeah, it's not. Sorry, it's I just leave it by that. It's fragile peace. And then what I wanted to ask you, because I said I wear many hats, my call then to Women's Major Group is engaging at the regional forum, especially in this region. What we need is stronger voices to kind of call on the end of the industrial military complex in our region. I showed you the region, you know which one I'm talking about. We really need to address this, and this is something civil society needs to address since we're looking at SDG 16 next year. And
just a little slower if possible, in
sorry.
case you don't see the chat.
Yeah, sorry, no, I didn't. Okay, so what I'm saying, I'll say it again. So my call to Women's Major Group members, all my fellow Women's Major Group members, is that we need to really, in this region, step up and tell our decision makers, specifically the decision makers in the global minority, those holding the most wealth, that we need an end to the industrial military complex. And we also need to hold our states accountable who has feminist foreign policies to also implement this internally, domestically in their states. And that's one of the calls I would say that we can bring in within this region, because we have a lot of responsibility towards other regions in terms of this. We have a lot of feminist foreign policy. I come from Sweden, and we had the first feminist foreign policy, but we also is one of the big exporters of arms, right? So we need an end to participating in the arms race globally. And then in terms of respecting planetary boundaries, what other analysis have we seen within this regional platform is that we have the rich countries in the region driving the climate catastrophe, and they're also driving global inequalities through extractivism on other continents. Within the region, we have energy crisis and energy poverty, and it's affecting folks from marginalized groups the hardest. And then one of the emerging issues that we need to keep an eye on is the digital misinformation and AI, and how that's and the lack of lifelong learning processes to address this. Okay, there's a lot. Is there any questions? Then please raise your hand, because I can't see the chat right now.
There's one question: how can civil society get involved in the regional forums? How they can attend? Are they virtual or in person? And if you could maybe wrap up in 1 or 2 minutes, that would also be awesome.
Okay, so then what I want to say is that we have working groups, and this is how you can engage. Usually we start with the prep work now in November, December. We're looking into having a strategy session in December. And we have different working groups that focus on different things. So if you're more into doing advocacy on a specific SDG that's being under review, you can engage through that. If you're from a country doing a VNR, you can engage through that. If you want to do a coordination of a civil society forum, that's also an opportunity. And the way we do advocacy in this region is just like the other regions that's been mentioned. We do interventions, we have spaces at the plenary to speak. The youth also have a specific, so we have civil society and then we have youth, and both of us usually get the same amount of speaking slots. And then we have side events. The side events used to be the most effective for collaborating with decision makers, but since that's been turned into virtual side events, I see that interaction, like, so that's also again like a closing space for civil society. And I think one of the flags I want to do is that the UN has told us that they have even less funding this year than they had last year. So I'm foreseeing that this is going to be continuous, like smaller and smaller engagement in this region, but I hope not, because I hope those who haven't engaged at the regional yet will. And then I'm not going to look at this, I can send this later, but we're part of the major groups and other stakeholders. And in terms of the forum, I just want to flag that the regional forum is on the 13th to 14th. And then on 12th is the Civil Society Forum. We don't yet have the youth pre-meeting, but for those who have been around, they know that this is CSW time, right? So that means we're probably, I don't know how much women's major group people we will have at the regional forum, because I assume many of you will actually engage in the CSW. So this is a little bit we need to strategize around. And because there's less funding, we don't have international sign languages here, but it will be Russian and French translations. And that's it. Oh yeah, and in terms of VNR countries, we have Armenia, Austria, Azerbaijan, Estonia, Georgia, and Spain. So if you're from any of these countries, please come and join us. And we will show how you can engage in the VNR process. And I think that's it for now. Yeah, then I will share this presentation with you, and it has kind of the timeline of how you engage at the EC region.
Thank you so much, Hannah. That was very comprehensive and very much tied to kind of everything we do at the Women's Major Group in terms of being both politically loud, but at the same time knowing how to work within how the system is formed to actually disrupt those systems and raise our voices within it. Thank you so much. Pame is mentioning in chat, just for those of you who might not see it, that the Civil Society Forum in Latin America and the Caribbean region is virtual, which also allows for civil society to participate from wherever they are without the need for funding, but it's also related to funding not being available. Yes, Pame, please go ahead.
No, gracias. Gracias, Hannah. Sí, muy completo. De algunas cosas similares, no sé si mencionaste, pero en Latinoamérica, además del foro de sociedad civil en general en el que estamos todos, también los jóvenes se reúnen y tienen su foro o su reunión, a veces el día anterior, a veces el mismo día, pero ellos mantienen su espacio. La otra cosa, bueno, nosotros nos queda la sesión del foro entre CCW y la CPD, así que también estamos en un momento difícil porque ir a los 3 lugares es muy complicado, entonces vamos a ver cómo nos organizamos. Yo quería preguntarte acerca de si siempre las reuniones en tu región son en Ginebra o si también va de acuerdo al país que tiene la presidencia de la mesa. En Latinoamérica se hacen donde la sede es en el país que tiene la presidencia, pero no siempre quieren hacerlo porque por supuesto tiene costos. Entonces CEPAL pone su sede, pero generalmente nos movemos, porque eso también hace a la incidencia. No es lo mismo, por lo menos desde nuestro punto de vista, ir siempre a la sede de la CEPAL que ir a tal o cual país, porque te permite hacer también otra incidencia en el marco de ese país y con otras relaciones. Entonces, no obstante, estoy de acuerdo con vos que es un espacio súper rico de incidencia porque generalmente hay personas y decisores de alto nivel, y también esto que ya mencionaba que CENAS, que lo vimos en la declaración política y que es algo que trae la Agenda 2030 de siempre, que es potenciar lo local. Y entonces vienen personas, vienen alcaldes, vienen personas de gobiernos locales, o sea, es sumamente interesante, pero a la vez es mucho. Bueno, entonces, un poco sobre la sede, y mi segunda pregunta es, ¿cómo articulan ustedes con los coordinadores residentes? Nosotros tuvimos por primera vez una reunión cerrada, otra vez, del mecanismo, de la mesa del mecanismo de sociedad civil, con los coordinadores residentes de todos los países de la región, y pudimos tener un intercambio, pero estábamos, no fue una reunión preparada, sino que nos invitaron en ese momento, y nos encontramos un poco como sociedad civil perdidos en qué preguntarle al coordinador residente, ¿no? Que es como, que es la base de Naciones Unidas en tu país sobre Agenda 2030. Entonces, por ahí, quizás en otra reunión, o podemos tener una segunda parte de este webinario que está muy interesante sobre estas articulaciones.
Okay, thank you so much.
Talk about
Sorry.
Hannah, can I kindly ask, and I'm so sorry, to kind of keep it short as well, because we're also waiting for, we only have like 10 minutes left in the webinar and we're waiting for the Africa region as well. Just to let you know.
Okay, I'll keep it super short. We usually always go to the UN office in Geneva. And I think listening to you, what you've talked about today, I have a lot to bring back to my regional forum to kind of talk about this table and the way you're organizing through that. I think that could really help us get better. I also think it's interesting to have these kind of moving around. Currently we have it in Geneva, which is difficult because Geneva is very, very expensive for many people. At the same time, UN has done it for so long, they kind of have collaborations now and they give discounts. I really don't, well, yeah, in terms of the regional coordinates, we have quite good relationship with the UNECE, but they're shifting and maybe that's changing. What I do know is that the UN bodies within our region tends to have sub-regional meetings with civil society, and that's what something they've done in the past. For example, UN Women usually have sub-regional meetings with civil society in Western Balkans or Caucasus or Central Asia. So that's one way they're doing it. But as civil society, as the ECRSM, we're not there as ECRSM, but civil society come to those spaces kind of separately. I'll keep that short, but yeah, if you have more questions, we can kind of talk about it at some other point. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Hannah, for understanding. And Pame, we can talk about together if we need another webinar, if we need another space to discuss these and learn from all different regions. And without further ado, I can actually give the floor to our last speaker, Toyin Chukwudozie, who is the Executive Director of Education as a Vaccine, Nigeria, and she is also our Anglophone Africa Regional Organizing Partner. Toyin, the floor is yours. Please tell us a little about the Africa Regional Civil Society engagements and the forum.
All right. Thank you so much, Shenaz, and hey, everyone. Thanks to all the people who have spoken before us. That's the benefit of being the last person to speak. So many things have been said already. It's what we do at the Africa regional level is very similar to what has been shared by others from other regions. I'm just going to talk a little bit specifically about how we have been able to organize as feminists to influence in the past few years. I mean, we know that we usually would wait for the announcement of the date and to know when exactly the forums are scheduled for, and then we look for ourselves on the continent, other feminist groups that are also interested in engaging. So would usually find us using our listserv. We share information about our meetings and come together to prepare a position to participate in the regional forums. We've collaborated with Femnet, we've collaborated with SDG Forum Kenya in the last couple of regional forums to just organize and look at the goals that are being reviewed, and then get our own statements, our own positions around those goals that are under review. It's usually a process that everybody contributes to, but sometimes we now also get somebody to just coordinate and bring it together. And then what we then do is use that as a document that helps us in our influencing when we get to the forum. In the last couple of years, it hasn't really been so straightforward or easy to influence the outcome documents we've had because of our position in our engagement in the what's it called? Shenaz, maybe remind me, the coordination mechanism. So we have opportunity to have access to the documents before, you know, the forum starts. And then when the forum starts and, you know, they are organizing to finalize the documents, we also have opportunity. So we take that opportunity to bring in some of our members into the room, maybe 2 or 3 at the most. And, you know, we position ourselves, you know, with the different groups working on the different goals so that we ensure that the position that we have already, you know, decided on as we come to the forum makes it into those recommendations for the outcome documents from the forum. We also find opportunity when we are in the forum to actually meet and have conversations about, you know, just even reviewing how it's going. And, you know, I mean, in my experience in the last, you know, few years, I would say that the space has shrunk and shrunk and shrunk. It used to be a little bit more productive, I would say, when we are in these spaces, when we are in these different side events, like you were saying, Hannah. Now the side events are virtual, so participation, yes, it's looking like, yes, we're able to have conversations, but the actual influencing that we want to see, it's not as strong. In the forum this year, at a point, it was like, you know, the coordination mechanism, you know, we were irritated, you know, and we were like, where's our voice in this space, you know? We are also seeing that our governments are not also taking it very seriously, the engagement at the regional level. And so even though in the past, we would take the opportunity, like you were sharing, Hannah, to find these people, to, you know, create those relationships that we can follow up on when we get back to the country. We're seeing more and more, we're seeing less and less of, you know, the people who really matter, who should be in those spaces, showing up in those spaces. And so when we come with the expectation that, you know, we might be able to influence in this way, we might just find government sending people who don't have so much decision-making power to come and speak on sessions and so on. But nonetheless, we still would try our best to see who helps us to advance our mission, our work when we get back to our countries. And like I said, this year, we were really irritated with the process, and, like, you know, we spoke up, and then we saw that by the second day or so, you know, it looked like they would then give more space to people to speak from the floor. So even for contributions from the floor, we use our position statements as, you know, what guides our conversations as we make those contributions from the floor, as well as our own experiences and lived realities. And so as we're moving into the next forum, we really want to see a lot more, at least, of us contributing to the statements that we put together, because that is really how we make our voices count for now, you know. And I know that for the coordination mechanism, both at regional level and at global level, there's continued push for the space to be opened up a lot more, so that the engagement is meaningful. And it's not just about us showing up in the spaces because they have to check a box that we were there. So I am just imploring and encouraging our members to look out for our emails, you know, when we on the list serve, when we start talking about, when it's time to start getting ready for the forums. Participating in these webinars is also one good way for us to start connecting, so that when the time comes, we are able to really come together and make our voices heard and make it count. I'll stop there because every other thing has been said. So thank you, Shanaz.
Thank you so much, Toyin. Your contributions have been super helpful to also connect, as you have said, the other regions and learn from our struggles, opportunities, but also challenges. Just to voice what Hannah has written in chat, it's also interesting to see which member states are in the regional forums and being critical of what other member states and being critical of other member states that are being performative. Maybe that's also a way to strategize around the regional forums, and also to have bilateral meetings with regional UN bodies and member state allies. Sorry, Hannah, I'm just reading out loud, so it can also be translated. Thank you all so much. This really has been very helpful to see what's happening in different regions, as well as basically to learn from each other and to be able to continue our work towards regional forums. We really hope that our participants will consider engaging in the regional forums. Unfortunately, we don't have any other time for questions, but thankfully we had some of them in between. If you would like to become a Women's Major Group member, you are welcome to use this link, and I can also put it gladly in chat to join the Women's Major Group. If you want to get kind of linked to your regional organizing partner of Women's Major Group, we'll also be happy to do that. We can go to the curriculum, Maitri. Thank you so much. So we also have an online learning tool for the Women's Major Group members that talks about Agenda 2030, the SDGs, and the regional processes, as well as HLPF and what we do there. So please, if you're interested to become a Women's Major Group member, please do. If you're interested to use this tool, please let us know. Thank you all so much for joining and being interested. Please always feel free to send us your questions or emails. We'll be more than happy to either answer them if we know, or direct you to the people who would know how to answer them. Many thanks to our incredible speakers who have given us their time and expertise. Thank you so much for joining. We had speakers today from Latin America to Asia, as you have seen. So a very wide time zone. Thank you all so much. And many thanks also to our interpreters and to my colleague Maitri as well for her help in preparation, and to all of you for being here and making today an inspiring and invigorating conversation. Thank you all so much.